Greetings, everyone, welcome to Six Path Weeb. Today's fanfiction exploration centers around an intriguing scenario. What if Naruko pushed an ANBU operative to the brink? Disclaimer. The content on this channel is intended solely for entertainment and discussion. I do not claim ownership of any anime footage featured in these videos. All rights and credits belong to their respective creators and copyright holders. Now then, let's dive right in. 5 years after the Kyuubi incident. The checkup had gone as smoothly as any other. It was a simple routine: bring young Naruko some basic supplies Janan in training could help collect, ask how she was feeling, ensure she wasn't being troubled by anyone, and then send her off to bed so the masked ANBU could report back to Hokage-sama and prepare for the next assignment. Inu-san. The masked shinobi instinctively tensed when something tugged lightly at his pant leg. He quickly composed himself upon realizing it was just the spirited little girl he was monitoring, though he would never call it babysitting. An elite ANBU didn't babysit. He reminded himself again, this was merely a protection detail. That was all. He turned to face the young blonde, who was still pulling at his trousers, trying to get his attention. "Yes, Naruko-chan?" he asked in his usual quiet, unrecognizable tone. "Why are people so unkind?" "Why are people so unkind?" he gently corrected her, buying time as he tried to find the best way to answer. Was Naruko really asking him this? "Why are people so unkind?" she repeated softly, her large blue eyes filled with sadness. It made Inu shift uncomfortably. Why did she have to look at him like that? Why couldn't she ask the Hokage-sama next time he visited? But since she had asked, and since ignoring her would feel wrong, he crouched down to eye level, letting out a quiet sigh. Naruko's gaze flickered over his fox-like mask with curiosity before settling back on his shadowed eyes. She wrung her hands and shifted nervously from foot to foot. She was scared of the answer. Is it really my fault? She wondered silently, chewing her lip. Inu, meanwhile, carefully weighed his words. He didn't want to upset her, but he also didn't want to overstep. Placing a hand gently on her small shoulder, he gave it a reassuring squeeze. "It's not your fault, Naruko-chan," he said calmly. At his words, Naruko visibly relaxed, as if a small weight had been lifted from her shoulders. Inu felt a quiet sense of relief at her reaction. "People can be complicated," he began. "Sometimes, they follow what others are doing without thinking for themselves. There are kind people too, but they can be hidden among those who aren't as thoughtful. Your kindness is important, and if you keep showing it, the right people will see it." Naruko frowned, tilting her head. "I don't really get it," she admitted. Inu wasn't surprised. Naruko had a good heart, but some ideas took time. Let's say I carved a smiley face into a tree and told you to find it," he said. "Would you spot it right away?" Naruko thought it over, then pouted. "No. Exactly. You might not see it immediately, but if you keep looking patiently, you'll notice more smiley trees around. Kind people are like that. Sometimes, you just have to look closely." Naruko's eyes lit up. "I will. I'll make them like me." Then she hesitated. "Do you think they will?" Inu gave her a soft nod. "As long as they learn to look beneath the surface, yes." "Huh? What does that mean?" Inu's voice held a playful note. "You'll understand when you're older." "You always say that." Naruko huffed. "Oh? Are you going to prove me wrong?" he teased, amused at the determined sparkle returning to her eyes. "You bet I will," she giggled, waving her fingers at him. "Language, Naruko-chan," he chided lightly as she tried to tickle him. He had to admit, she was getting better. He tensed slightly as her fingers darted toward that one spot on his side that always seemed to get him. His teammates would never let him live it down if they knew she'd surprised him once before. After a moment, he cracked his knuckles dramatically, making her pause. "No," she said with wide eyes, backing away with mock fear. Inu's eyes sparkled behind the mask. "My turn." Naruko tried to dash off, but he easily caught her by the back of her shirt. "No. No. No, Inu, ha ha ha. Way. Ha ha ha. Mercy? And ha ha, no way." He couldn't help but smile at the way she squirmed and laughed. These moments, he had to admit, made his visits far more enjoyable than he liked to admit. 2 years later. "Inu-san." The enthusiastic voice was all the warning the ANBU needed. He'd sensed her chakra the moment she approached. That bright orange jacket certainly didn't help her blend in, it practically shouted across the village. Still, Inu was ready. He caught Naruko with ease as she leapt into his arms, laughing as he spun her gently in a circle. I haven't seen you in forever. She grinned brightly. I checked in just last week, he replied dryly, setting her down. Still. She chirped. I like you better than the other ANBU. They're way more serious than you. They can't be that bad. They are, she insisted with a playful stomp. Inu chuckled softly. Ma. Ninja aren't supposed to be loud, Naruko. What are they teaching you at the academy? It had been a rhetorical question, but Naruko launched into an excited explanation anyway, her voice still too loud. As she talked about her lessons and classmates, Inu opened a kitchen cupboard and sighed at the overwhelming number of instant ramen cups. Then the teacher started talking about chakra, but it got so boring I almost fell asleep. I still don't get how Shikamaru stays awake through any of it. Inu turned and gently covered her mouth with his gloved hand. Indoor voice, he said, raising an eyebrow behind the mask. Or maybe start practicing your whisper. He removed his hand just in time to see a mischievous gleam in her eye. If he'd waited a second longer, she might have licked his glove. Naruko crossed her arms. You're no fun, Inu-san. He ignored the jab, though he suspected she was pouting under her smile. Then, as if on cue, she launched herself up, reaching for his mask. He caught her wrist midair. "Aw, come on." She whined. "Just a quick peek." "ANBU wear masks for a reason," he said simply. "I wouldn't tell anyone. Promise. Believe it." He paused at the phrase. Every now and then, she'd say something that caught him off guard. "I believe you," he replied sincerely. "But I still can't show you." Naruko looked disappointed, so he quickly added, "Besides, you're already special, you get to see me more than most people ever do." A smile tugged at her lips despite herself. "VSH. You don't seem that special." Inu smirked behind his mask and gently shook her upside down. "You sure know how to make a ninja feel appreciated." Naruko giggled, dangling upside down. "Just take off the bandana. I bet you have purple hair or something." "My blue hair would definitely distract people," he replied with mock seriousness. Her eyes widened. "Blue? No way." "Blue?" His lips curled into a small, amused smile before he let out a soft laugh. "Blue. Ha ha ha." Kakashi chuckled quietly as well, though his laughter was calm compared to the energetic joy of the young girl in front of him. Or was it orange? He wondered aloud, tapping his mask thoughtfully. Naruko paused mid-laugh. "Huh?" Though green might also be a possibility. Realizing that he was simply teasing her, Naruko puffed her cheeks and pouted. "That's not fair," the 7-year-old said with a playful glare, lightly kicking at his chest. He let her use him as a springboard, watching as Naruko flipped gracefully to the ground, finishing in a low crouch. Kakashi nodded in quiet approval, at least she knew how to land softly. But then he noticed her shoulders hunching, and she looked down at her feet with a furrowed brow. Inu-san. "Yes? Will I ever see your face?" she asked softly, glancing up with heavier eyes than before. The ANBU observed her in silence, which made her quickly glance away. "Maybe," he finally said. "If you learn to look underneath the underneath." He gently ruffled her hair. "You always say that." He gave a thoughtful hum. "Don't act like I'm not paying attention. I'm trying to look underneath the underneath," she exclaimed, pointing at his mask. "Not that literally, silly," he replied, amusement lacing his voice. "Inu baka. Keep that up and you might never see it, Gaki-chan," he teased. Meanie. 1 year later. Naruko. The 8-year-old frowned in her sleep and rolled over. 5 more minutes, she murmured. "Naruko, wake up." The voice was firmer this time, and Naruko sat up abruptly. "What?" she asked, blinking sleep from her eyes. Her gaze landed on the familiar ninja standing before her. "Inu? I came to say goodbye." Her heart skipped. "Gee, goodbye?" she echoed, trembling a little. Inu nodded quietly. Instead of panicking or shouting, as he might have expected, Naruko leapt toward him. But the bed sheets tangled around her legs, sending her tumbling, until Inu caught her gently before she could fall. He set her back on her feet and untangled the sheets, all while noticing the tears welling in her bright eyes. He sighed inwardly, this was going to be difficult. Naruko looked up at him, her thoughts spinning. For a moment, she hoped it was just a strange dream. But the way her lip trembled and her throat tightened told her this was very real. "Why?" she cried, gripping the front of his armor tightly. She pressed her forehead to it, her tears sliding down her cheeks as she struggled to understand. Naruko, Inu said gently, his usual calm tone unchanged. But she wasn't ready to listen yet. Why are you leaving me? She sobbed, trying to see his expression through the mask. Naruko. She felt like the only person who really understood her was going away, and she didn't understand why. Did I do something wrong? Why are you leaving? Naruko. She fell silent, startled by the rare firmness in his voice. Inu slowly placed his hands over hers and pried them gently away from his armor. Holding her hands in his, he knelt down to meet her eyes. There was a flicker of pain in her expression, and Inu could feel his own emotions stirring. I'm going on a mission, he explained softly. Her eyes widened in realization. Confusion turned to understanding, then to concern, before she finally nodded slowly. Oh. She flushed, a little embarrassed by her outburst, and looked away. Inu gave her hands a soft squeeze before letting go. How long? She asked, trying to wipe her tears away discreetly. I don't know. Will it be long? Yes. He nodded. Is it a hard mission? Yes. He answered truthfully. That made her glance down again, but she didn't cry. Not this time. Naruko? She took a step forward, silently asking for permission. Inu paused for a moment, then relaxed and opened his arms slightly. That was all she needed. She rushed into him and held him tightly. It had been so long since either of them had felt this kind of comfort, and it showed in the way she trembled. Be a good ninja, all right? He encouraged. She nodded. Don't prank Iruka-sensei too much. Only a little, she replied with a small, teary smile. You can cry when you're happy, he said with a gentle nudge, but try to be strong when you're sad. Okay. She nodded again, wiping her eyes quickly. The ANBU chuckled quietly. If you want to become Hokage, it's going to take a lot of hard work. Naruko pulled away and stood up straight. I will. I'll become even stronger than you, Inu-ni-san. He froze at her affectionate use of ni-san, but then gave her head a warm pat. You do that. Good luck, Gaki-chan. For once, he let his true affection show in his voice. With a soft puff of smoke, he vanished. Naruko stood there, feeling the quiet return. She climbed back into bed, replaying every word he had said in her mind. His warmth lingered in her heart. He cares about me too. It wasn't enough to help her fall asleep right away, but it gave her strength. The next morning. Iruka raised a brow as Naruko burst into the classroom more energetic than ever. Must be that talk about becoming Hokage, he thought with a smile. His smile twitched, however, when he heard a soft snore from the back row. Turning swiftly, he lobbed a piece of chalk with pinpoint accuracy, smacking Shikamaru in the forehead. No napping in class. The Nara boy groaned. So troublesome. Iruka sighed but couldn't hide the grin that tugged at his lips. The room may have been loud and unpredictable, but it was full of dreams, and for now, that was more than enough. 3 months later. Itadakimasu. Naruko cheered with bright enthusiasm, loud enough for the entire ramen stand to hear. Beside her, the Sandaime Hokage let out a soft sigh, shaking his head with fond amusement. He offered a grateful nod to Tucci as his own order was placed before him. The ramen chef gave him a warm, polite smile before returning to prepare more servings, already anticipating that the ever-energetic Uzumaki would be back for seconds, or thirds. Her love for ramen was well known, after all. Smiling quietly to himself, the Hokage took a moment to enjoy the peaceful atmosphere. A rare break from the never-ending scrolls of paperwork gave him the opportunity to unwind and spend time with Naruko. Despite her spirited nature, these little moments were always special. That was, until he noticed a subtle shift in her demeanor. From the corner of his eye, he studied her, noting the way her shoulders slumped slightly and the sparkle in her eyes dimmed just a little. It hadn't been prompted by anything obvious in the surroundings. The air was calm, the village busy but peaceful. What's on your mind, Naruko-chan? The Sandaime asked gently when the silence lingered, though he had a quiet hunch. Her voice, when it came, was softer than usual, thoughtful, even. Gigi. Do you know when Inu-san is coming back? Is she doing okay? The Hokage paused, a hand resting on his teacup as he looked at her. Naruko's hopeful expression tugged at his heart. That information is confidential, Naruko, he said with gentle firmness. We've talked about this before. Naruko's hands tightened slightly around her chopsticks, her gaze falling to the noodles in her bowl. I just want to know if Inu-ne-san is all right, she murmured, stirring her ramen absent-mindedly. The Hokage blinked at the affectionate term she used, "ne-san." So Kakashi had allowed himself to grow that close to her after all? A faint smile ghosted across his lips, touched with a hint of melancholy. He lowered his head slightly, considering his response. Inu-san's assignments were demanding. While still ongoing, she would be on extended duty for some time yet. The Hokage had seen firsthand how such long-term responsibilities could leave their mark. Kakashi had carried the burden with quiet strength, but the weight was visible to those who knew what to look for. The solitude, the constant vigilance, they changed a person. Though she hid it well, even someone as composed as Kakashi had begun to show signs of wear. Naruko, in her innocent way, had brought something precious back into Kakashi's life, the ability to smile more freely, to relax when away from the shadows. The Sandaime had, not without intention, gently nudged Kakashi toward those opportunities. Assigning her to look after Naruko more often had been a calculated kindness. And it had worked. Naruko had helped draw Kakashi back into the warmth of ordinary life, something he hadn't known he needed. Still, change was necessary. The Hokage looked at Naruko again, seeing the quiet worry on her face. "Naruko-chan," he said gently. She looked up, her eyes wide. "Your dog is just fine," he said warmly. A brilliant smile broke across her face, lifting the heaviness from the moment. The Hokage forced away the twinge of guilt he felt. There were decisions he would have to make soon, and consequences that would come with them. But for now, he chose to focus on this small joy. He only hoped that his quiet interference wouldn't dampen Naruko's bright spirit. 2 months later. As expected, Naruko was not pleased when the Hokage told her she would no longer be seeing the mysterious ANBU operative known as Inu-san. Similarly, Kakashi, now released from her ANBU duties, hadn't taken the news lightly. After the decision had been made, she had needed space to collect herself. 2 training fields were left in less than perfect condition before she finally returned to speak with the Hokage calmly. Despite everything, the Sandaime remained firm in his choice. It wasn't only about protocol or service terms, it was about Kakashi's well-being. As difficult as it had been to step away from her responsibilities, the Hokage believed this change would be for the better. The long-term toll of ANBU life was something he understood well, and she had done more than her fair share. "I'm sorry for this, Kakashi," he had told her sincerely, "but I truly believe it's what you need." To his quiet relief, Kakashi hadn't argued. She understood the weight of the decision. She also understood the importance of keeping her former relationship with Naruko a private matter. What had been part of her ANBU duties would remain there, a truth unspoken, a connection that would quietly fade into memory. When the time came, Kakashi handed over the familiar mask that had once concealed her identity. The Hokage had noticed a pause, a slight reluctance, but in the end, she let it go, honoring the silent code. "What happened in ANBU will stay in ANBU," she murmured, meeting the Hokage's gaze. "Indeed," he replied with equal solemnity. And though she moved forward, now as a jounin, there was a trace of quiet longing that surfaced now and again. It showed only once, during her first official debriefing since the transition. She had arrived with her usual calm, flipping through a small orange book, clearly more for appearance than interest. When she looked up at the Hokage, her tone was dry, but her words carried a touch of emotion. "So, has Naruko asked you about her missing puppy yet?" She never mentioned it again. A few months later. "Hatake-san." A single lazy eye drifted from the page it had been focused on and glanced down toward the Chonin who had called out from the ground. The branch he was sitting on was one of the few places the masked jounin liked to return to occasionally for some peaceful reading. The branch had just the right angle to lean against the tree trunk comfortably. The afternoon sun, combined with a gentle breeze, made the temperature perfect. It wasn't high enough to hinder visibility, nor low enough to be noticed easily. The area was calm but not unnervingly quiet, the ideal spot for undisturbed relaxation. Or at least, it used to be. This was the second interruption in one afternoon. "Ah, Umino-san," he greeted with relaxed courtesy. "Is there something I can help you with?" Kakashi didn't mind being interrupted by Iruka. He recalled how devoted the Chonin had been to protecting Naruko when strangers had infiltrated the land. Iruka had since become a guiding figure to the young Kunoichi, similar to how Kakashi once supported younger ninja during his earlier days. But what happened in ANBU stayed in ANBU. Judging by Iruka's slightly embarrassed expression, Kakashi could guess this wasn't an official matter. "Apologies for disturbing your time again," Iruka said, bowing his head slightly. "Not official business," Kakashi noted from his posture. This must be more personal. He let out a mental sigh, already suspecting where this conversation was heading. Ma. I was going to leave anyway, Kakashi said casually, a well-practiced excuse, as he dropped from the branch with fluid ease. Iruka respectfully stepped aside to give him space. Kakashi, still holding his book, turned as if preparing to leave. Again? Iruka asked with a hint of skepticism. Hi. If there's nothing else, I'll be on my way. I've got somewhere to be, eventually, and you never know how traffic slows you down, Kakashi replied smoothly, defaulting to his usual excuse list. He was almost in the clear. Hatake-san, Iruka called again. There were always exceptions. Kakashi paused, hiding the flash of resignation behind his mask. He didn't look back. Thank you, Iruka said, sincerely and warmly. Kakashi blinked behind his mask. Yep, personal. I'm not sure what you mean, Kakashi replied, playing it off. Now if you'll He stopped as Iruka chuckled softly. Did he just chuckle at me? Kakashi turned his head slightly to confirm it. Iruka was indeed smiling, hands on hips in a surprisingly firm stance. I just wanted to thank you for the advice you gave me half a year ago. I never had the chance to properly say it before. And more than that, thank you for stepping in to protect Naruko. I've become a better teacher because of that support. A brief twinge of jealousy passed through Kakashi before it was replaced with approval. It was good that Naruko had people who supported her openly and sincerely. With nothing to add, Kakashi shifted his weight, unsure of what reaction was most appropriate. Iruka seemed to sense this and studied him, searching for a response that Kakashi wasn't about to give. The Chunin finally sighed. We would have been in trouble without you. Thanks for watching over Naruko. It's my duty as a Jounin of the Hidden Leaf to care for all the people and ninja in our village, Kakashi replied neutrally, turning away. That he watched over Naruko more carefully than most, he chose not to say aloud. I see. You're not too great at accepting gratitude, Iruka noted. Kakashi's shoulder might have twitched, but if it did, it was too subtle to confirm. Johnny. Kakashi walked away, mentally kicking himself for getting thrown off balance so easily. I hope Naruko's future sensei will look after her the same way, Iruka's voice drifted faintly behind him. Kakashi silently agreed. 3 years later. Over the following years, keeping an eye on the young kunoichi he'd grown to care about had become a quiet habit of Kakashi's, though he didn't like admitting it even to himself. Even though Inu's departure had affected Naruko deeply, Kakashi still watched over her from the shadows between missions. Her lively presence was something he had come to appreciate in contrast to the often somber tone of his work. He didn't allow himself to grow too close. A strong public connection between the well-known copy ninja and the host of the Nine Tails could attract dangerous attention. Despite trusting his comrades with his life, Kakashi knew that information could slip out in unexpected ways. So he did what he could, protecting her quietly from the sidelines. It didn't surprise him when the Hokage began probing Kakashi's thoughts on forming a balanced team. The elder seemed to have been monitoring both Kakashi and Naruko carefully. Though Kakashi had repeatedly said he wouldn't make a good teacher, and the Hokage had repeatedly dismissed that concern, there was something about the prospect that intrigued him. The incident with the Forbidden Scroll had passed Kakashi by while he was recovering from an intense mission, but word spread quickly through the hospital. Akun, reluctantly scouting in his rest time, shared that Naruko had overcome Mizuki with determination, though he refused to say exactly how, as payback for being disturbed. Kakashi figured he'd find out soon enough during their survival training. To his relief, Naruko passed the exam. Not everyone did, and some never would. Kakashi was glad that she had taken a significant step toward her dream. The Hokage, crafty as always, had managed to place Naruko in Team 7 despite council protests. Her academic scores, unfortunately low, were used to justify pairing her with the top student, Sasuke, following the village's traditional system. Why were her scores so low? Kakashi wondered. Did bias from teachers hold her back? He pushed away the thought that Naruko might have forgotten her promise to him. It was a silly idea. Still, he couldn't help but feel a little concern. Eventually, Team 7 was formed. Kakashi only hoped they wouldn't fail the initial test like all his previous students had. A few days later. Naruko held her breath in anticipation as she saw a hand begin to open the classroom door, unaware of the prank waiting on the other side. Poof! A cloud of chalk surrounded the silver-haired Jounin as the eraser bounced harmlessly off his head. Naruko broke into giggles. She fell for it. She really fell for it. Sakura immediately began apologizing, mortified. Naruko didn't understand why, it was just a harmless prank. And truthfully, she could have done far worse. Sasuke, unimpressed, muttered under his breath, "Is this really a jounin?" The mysterious jounin, brushing the eraser aside, studied them one by one, seemingly indifferent. Then, with a thoughtful tap on his chin, he spoke. "How should I put this?" He paused, and then said flatly, "I'm not too fond of you." Naruko's face dropped. That wasn't quite the reaction she'd expected. Maybe I should have gone with the itching powder after all. The group missed the faint amusement in Kakashi's eye. They were already underestimating him, which made tomorrow's surprise all the more fun. There might be potential here, he thought. The council won't be pleased if I send the Uchiha prodigy back to the academy, but I'm not too worried about their reaction. "Meet me on the roof," he said before vanishing in a puff of smoke. Instead of teleporting straight to the roof, Kakashi reappeared partway up the stairs, just within earshot. He liked to hear what his students said when they thought he was gone. "I want to learn that," Naruko shouted enthusiastically. "Quiet down, Naruko," Sasuke replied sharply. Kakashi shook his head, oddly comforted by the familiar energy. "Let's see how long I can keep up with this team." Next day. There was a moment of anticipation as she finally saw the team begin to cooperate. It was clear that their unity was tentative, but there was potential for genuine collaboration. She understood better than most how individuals with differing personalities could still find common ground when it truly mattered. Still, it wouldn't hurt to observe their coordination a little longer. "So, the three of you consider yourselves a unit? That's your reasoning?" she asked calmly, though with a sharp edge that hinted at deeper evaluation. The three students tensed slightly under the experienced Jounin's gaze but remained firm in their decision, standing by their mutual choice. They were determined to work as one. The atmosphere around their masked instructor grew heavier for just a moment, before Kakashi released the mild illusion technique he had quietly placed on them. Their genuine reactions had made the small expenditure of chakra entirely worthwhile. With a soft sigh, he said, "You pass." "What?" "I said, you pass," he repeated, this time letting a small, sincere smile replace his earlier stern demeanor. Naruko stood still for a moment, almost frozen in surprise as she looked at her sensei. We passed?" "Yada," she exclaimed, beaming with joy. Kakashi casually slid his hands into his pockets, realizing he now had a team under his guidance. That also meant dealing with more paperwork, a likely shift in his daily routine, and the prospect of numerous low-level missions ahead. None of it was particularly thrilling, but manageable. He exhaled slowly. Being a mentor wasn't exactly what he had envisioned for himself. Kakashi was a master of multitasking. Of course, many skilled ninja could manage multiple things at once, but Kakashi made it look effortless. He could walk through the village while reading his book, avoiding lampposts, fellow shinobi in a hurry, and even distracted civilians, all without missing a step or a sentence. But as with all talents, it came with a minor drawback: he was easily distracted by his surroundings. That meant he never truly became fully immersed in the story he was reading. A perfect example of this was during particularly dull D-ranked missions, like the one he currently supervised for his young Genin team. He wouldn't have minded a little peace and quiet to enjoy his book, but unfortunately, his team was anything but calm. "How is this even considered a mission?" Naruko grumbled as she tugged at another plant with a slight pout. Kakashi turned a page and half listened. The word dynamic floated through his thoughts to describe them, but even that felt too calm. "Naruko. That's not a weed," Sakura scolded from across the garden. "That's the fifth herb you've pulled out by mistake." Naruko blinked, looking at the plant in her hand. "It looks like a weed to me. It doesn't even have flowers," she protested. "Ishikawa-san showed us which ones to pull. Pay attention, like Sasuke-kun does." Sakura huffed, hands on her hips in classic exasperation. Kakashi noticed Sasuke freeze slightly. The quiet Uchiha glanced into his own basket, then casually plucked a weed and added it in, eyes flicking toward the arguing pair. "Sasuke pulled the same one earlier," Naruko declared, pointing toward Sasuke's basket. That genuinely surprised Kakashi. So she had been paying attention. "Don't say that. Sasuke-kun wouldn't make a mistake," Sakura argued defensively, giving Sasuke a hopeful look. Sasuke responded simply. Kakashi flipped a page of his book. "Team dynamics," he mused, "always interesting." "Sasuke. I saw you put that in your basket," Naruko shouted, her finger still aimed squarely at the evidence. I did not, Sasuke said flatly. Did too. Kakashi sighed. Now. If you all focused as much on your tasks as you do on bickering, this mission would have been done by now. The three Genin paused and turned to glare at him. You could help, you know, Naruko muttered. Her teammates didn't say anything, but their faces said they agreed. Kakashi didn't look up from his book. He turned another page with exaggerated calm, smirking slightly to himself at how predictable they were. Being a sensei, he was learning, could be quite entertaining. But it wasn't just fun and games, it was a big responsibility. The safety, growth, and teamwork of the Genin were on his shoulders. And contrary to what some believed, a Jounin wasn't allowed to teach advanced jutsu right away. Before learning anything special, students had to master the basics. This helped ensure no one grew too powerful too quickly without earning that trust. That level of instruction had to wait until they became Chonin. Pity, Kakashi thought. That would have made things simpler. He turned another page and could practically feel the rising frustration from his students. It's your mission, he reminded calmly, I'm just here to supervise. Sasuke, he added, if you've already pulled the plant, you can't put it back. It's best to finish what you started. See? Naruko said triumphantly. Told you. It was probably an accident, Sakura said, trying to defend Sasuke. Was not. Was too. Loud? Definitely. But there was more to them than just noise. Kakashi sighed again, pushing the thought aside. He'd find the right word to describe them later. For now, he hoped, really hoped, that with more practice, they'd learn to work together as a real team. Stop calling Sasuke-kun names, Naruko. Sakura warned. But Sakura-chan. Naruko whined in protest. Yes. If everything went according to plan, Kakashi figured he might make it through the week with his sanity intact. A few weeks later. After completing a long string of simple village missions, Kakashi decided it was time to switch things up. Training was long overdue. They had developed a very unique, if a bit chaotic, team dynamic, but they managed to keep one another grounded. And Naruko, especially, needed a more active outlet. Training. Naruko cheered, bouncing toward their usual training field. Her teammates trailed behind her. Naruko. Be quiet already. Sakura groaned. You've said that like 20 times. Sasuke just gave Naruko a look of mild disapproval and crossed his arms, turning to Kakashi with a pointed stare that clearly said, aren't you going to do something? Kakashi simply flipped another page in his book. Sensei. What are you going to teach us? Naruko asked eagerly. Self-reflection, Kakashi replied evenly. A long silence followed. What? Why not a new jutsu? Naruko complained, her excitement fading. Self-reflection is even more important than learning a new technique, Kakashi said with a cheerful tone. Why? Naruko asked, deflated. That sounds kinda boring. Kakashi lowered his book and gave her a look that made her go quiet. Because it helps you understand your strengths and weaknesses, he explained. That way, you can improve yourself even without someone always guiding you. That got the Genin thinking. Even Sasuke and Sakura, who had seemed skeptical, paused at the seriousness in their sensei's voice. Now, Kakashi added, let's begin. Isn't that your job, sensei? Sakura asked politely, though her tone carried a hint of curiosity and challenge. Kakashi gave a light, amused smile at the implication. It is my job to teach you certain skills, he agreed. But I won't train you unless you show dedication. You need to be motivated and willing to put in the effort. So we're supposed to train ourselves a bit first? To figure out where we're most interested? Sakura followed up. Exactly. Kakashi nodded. I'm here to support you, but only after you've handled the basics properly. But aren't the basics already taught at the academy? Sasuke interjected, clearly frustrated. Kakashi turned to him calmly. Tell me, Sasuke, how do you plan to run if you haven't learned how to walk yet? Naruko suddenly looked up, her expression thoughtful. Kakashi noted the change, wondering if his words had triggered a memory in her. Maybe Naruko still needs help catching up, Sasuke muttered, underestimating how sharp both his teammate and teacher were. Naruko's eyes narrowed. What did you just say? Didn't hear me? I said it again. You better watch. Enough, Kakashi interrupted firmly. What did you say, Sasuke-kun? Sakura asked, confused by the tension rising. Who do you think you are? Someone who's more capable than. I said stop, Kakashi repeated. A sudden change in atmosphere fell over them. It was brief, but strong enough to halt all conversation. The three young ninjas froze, surprised by the invisible pressure. What? What was that? Sakura asked cautiously. That's something we call presence, Kakashi said calmly. Sasuke whispered, I think it's what they call intensity or focused intent. Correct, Kakashi acknowledged. It's something you'll learn to sense and overcome. Over time, you'll be able to stand confidently even in high-pressure situations. We'll train that, along with chakra control, strategy, body awareness, Naruko's hopeful expression dimmed slightly, reflexes, and how to use your movements more efficiently. Will we learn how to? Well, spar? Sakura asked. Kakashi didn't answer that directly. More importantly, we'll be learning how to work as a team. You'll need those skills for future missions. Sasuke frowned at that. We'll have practice matches every other day, Kakashi continued. Originally, I'd planned to start tomorrow. But since Sasuke believes he's mastered the basics, let's have him demonstrate today. Sasuke tensed. Naruko, Sakura, go warm up. I'll be observing your spar once I'm done here. Yes. Both girls answered, though they clearly wished they could watch the first match. Naruko wanted to see Sasuke get a reality check, while Sakura had hoped to see him impress their teacher. Though Kakashi acknowledged that Sasuke was currently ahead in some areas, the boy's overconfidence was still a problem. Out of 10 common mistakes, more than half come from poor reactions or weak reflexes, he explained to Sasuke. The rest? Overconfidence and misjudging others. Let's see if I can point out one or two of those. After being lightly tossed to the ground several times, Sasuke began to realize that Kakashi was far more detail-oriented than any academy instructor. The Jounin was strict, and his methods, though odd, were effective. Sasuke glanced at him, unsure of what to make of the man. Kakashi, however, quietly noted the shift in Sasuke's attitude. Nearby, a pair of curious blue eyes watched with quiet envy. About a week later. Naruko sighed softly as she stood before the large memorial stone. Her eyes carefully scanned the long list of names engraved into the dark surface. There were more names than she had imagined. Is one of them Inu's? She wondered to herself. I'll never know for sure. The thought made her heart ache. She wouldn't let herself cry, though, not in front of Inu's memory. Kakashi-sensei said these people were remembered as heroes, she thought. Maybe Inu's name is here too. She crouched down and pressed her hands together, offering a quiet prayer, even if she wasn't sure she was doing it right. Then she sat in silence for a while, reading name after name. Naruko? She quickly turned her head. Kakashi-sensei, she said, unsure how to respond. Her usual energetic spark was missing, and Kakashi noticed. Still, he simply smiled. I thought you'd be working on those jump drills. Naruko flushed. I just took a break. I wanted to see if anyone I knew was here. Kakashi gave her a thoughtful look. Do you know the name of the person you're thinking of? Naruko shook her head. No. Then why are you looking for them? Because they meant something to me, she said softly. A hero? She nodded. Yeah. Kakashi had a good idea who she meant. His heart tightened. Gently, he ruffled her blonde hair. Naruko gave him a slight glare, but didn't pull away. Kakashi looked back at the stone, eyes falling on a trio of familiar names. Obito, Rin, Sensei. You remind me so much of this team. This time, he silently promised, things will be different. He remembered the troubled look in Sasuke's eyes and sighed inwardly. At least, he hoped things would be different. Sensei? Are you all right? I'm okay. You know, even if you don't know your hero's name. I'm sure they're here somewhere. Naruko gave a small smile. Thanks, Sensei. Now, how about showing me how your training's going? Brightening up instantly, Naruko grinned and dashed forward. I've improved so much. Watch this. She called out excitedly. Kakashi watched her go, then turned back to the stone for one last quiet moment. After offering a brief prayer, he followed his student. Naruko, try pushing upward, not just forward. Focus your energy in the right direction, he advised. Better. Again. A few months later. Move, Kakashi shouted, his voice urgent. His student hesitated. I said go. This is an order. He repeated, his voice sharp with concern. It had been a long time since Kakashi had truly felt fear during a mission. In his ANBU days, he'd often felt detached, indifferent to the outcome. But since he started teaching again, and since meeting Naruko, everything had changed. He wanted to succeed for them. To see them smile. To give them a future. Now, as he struggled against restraints, that fear returned stronger than ever. He pushed against them with all his strength, but it wasn't enough. His mind raced. I should have noticed the plan. Made an extra clone. Done more. Move, he urged again, hearing a sinister chuckle from the rogue ninja beside him. No. Naruko's voice rang out, surprising him. She stood firm, unwavering. Kakashi's heart pounded. He had always worried they weren't ready, but now he saw the team finally moving together, united in purpose. They were working as one. And they were doing well. Once he was free, he let his chakra surge, determination clear in his stance. The rogue ninja before him instantly became wary. Kakashi narrowed his eyes. This time, he wasn't going to let anyone fall behind. About a week later, Naruko smiled warmly and waved to the villagers standing on the bridge, catching sight of Inari returning the gesture with as much excitement as he could muster. A light feeling of joy settled in her chest as she turned her attention back to the group ahead. Kakashi-sensei was, once again, immersed in his usual reading, looking completely relaxed. Sasuke appeared to be deep in thought, his expression as serious as ever. Sakura tried to start a conversation with him, but when she noticed he wasn't in the mood to talk, she respectfully sat back in silence. For once, Naruko chose to enjoy the peaceful moment without speaking. The usual urge to be the loudest voice in the group had quieted for a bit. She felt satisfied, grateful, even, that everything had gone smoothly in the end. A smile tugged at her lips, eventually growing into a cheerful grin as she nodded to herself in silent approval. Team 7 was incredible. Together, they would grow stronger and become the best. Naruko, Kakashi's calm voice pulled her from her thoughts. Startled, Naruko blinked. Kakashi-sensei had moved without her noticing again. He was surprisingly quiet despite his easygoing appearance. She could still remember how skillful he had been during the mission with Zabuza. Even though he'd accepted help from the team, that only made her admire him more. After all, teamwork was about supporting each other when needed. Yes, sensei? She replied, noticing that both Sakura and Sasuke were still in their own thoughts. She flinched slightly when a gentle hand rested on her head, tousling her hair. Her wide eyes looked up at her teacher, the growing respect she held for him shining in her expression. Well done, Naruko. The masked Jounin offered her what seemed to be a smile, visible through the kind curve of his eye. Naruko could almost feel a gentle warmth radiating from the compliment, a happy buzz rising within her at the recognition. A huge grin spread across her face as she beamed back at him, not even needing to say anything. Her joy said it all. With a final pat on the head, Kakashi turned his attention to his other students, calling Sasuke aside for a quiet chat of his own. He talked to me first, Naruko thought in amazement. She didn't know if it was intentional or just a coincidence, but it still made her heart feel light. Yes. She thought with pride, nearly skipping with happiness. All the way back home, Naruko seemed to carry a glow of joy with her. Her upbeat energy occasionally made her teammates glance at her in surprise, but even they couldn't help smiling a little. From the background, Kakashi glanced at her and gave a small shake of his head, quietly amused. Minato-sensei. Is this what it feels like to be a teacher? He could almost picture his own sensei giving him a wise smile and a reassuring ruffle of the hair, just like he had done to Naruko. I'll do my best, sensei, he promised silently, his smile hidden behind his mask. Dear YouTube family. That's all for now. If you enjoyed the content, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to my channel for more. With appreciation. 6 Path Weeb.